Do you find it hard to explain to friends and family what you now do? Are you wasting valuable time by attempting to figure out challenges on your own? We have created a community for ex-corporate people running their own business who want to live a life they love whilst giving back to their community. This is the Build, Live, Give show. We bring you first-hand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day. We get real with no corporate BS. And now your host, Paul Higgins.
Welcome to the Build, Live, Give podcast, episode number 10. I'm Paul Higgins and I'm your host, and today we've got a special guest, Amelia Lee. Amelia works for Undercover Architect, and Amelia travelled the world doing big architectural projects, and she worked for some wonderful companies, and she also had a very successful career with Mirvac here in Australia, and she names a couple of key projects that I think you'll be really surprised of the legacy that she's left through her architecture. But she lost a little bit of passion when there was some downsizing around the GFC, and she decided with a couple of other people from Mirvac to go out and start their own firm. And that was fantastic. But she got involved in a project called the Hunger Project, which is just a wonderful story. And that led for a real life change moment for her. It was like a sliding door. And she talks about how she went through that change, how she involved her partner and her family through that change. And it's a really great story for those people that are looking to really change what you do if you're working in corporate or in a business that may not be the right values fit for you. Amelia just gives you a great case in point. And she also talks about the Hunger Project and what she does there. And she also talks about her lovely new environment where she lives in the hinterland. So, she, really has got a great product, and she really helps people and creates a community, and it's a wonderful podcast. So grab your pens and paper ready for some really good advice from Amelia. As far as the show goes, we're continuing to grow. The amount of downloads we're getting is fantastic. Also the 5-star reviews and subscriptions. So please, if you love this podcast and love others that you've listened to, please subscribe. And also we love those 5-star reviews. We really want to build this community. And if you want to know more about the community, you can go to Build, Live, Give in Facebook. It's a closed but free group, and you can go in there and, we really support ex-corporate, ex-careers, building a great business, living a great life, and giving back to the community. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Amelia Lee. Welcome, Amelia Lee, owner of Undercover Architect, to the Build, Live, Give podcast. We'll get to know you a lot more through this podcast today, but why don't we just start with a brief summary of your journey to where we are today?
Certainly. Thank you very much for having me, Paul. It's great to be here. So I'm Amelia Lee. I own a business called Undercover Architect, as you said, and I have been in the architectural industry now for over 20 years. So I grew up and was educated in Sydney and did my degree there, and as a graduate did a lot of work, mainly public work, particularly around the Olympic site and buildings like the refurbishment of Customs House down at Circular Quay. So I had a fantastic start to my career in Sydney. And then I started travelling and working overseas and relocated to Brisbane. And once in Brisbane, I worked in private practice and then started working for Mirvac, which at the time was one of Australia's largest residential developers. And I was in their senior design team. So I was project architect over a couple of really large-scale residential developments that included both houses and apartments. And in 2009, I left there. Mirvac went through a big process to respond to the global financial crisis and looked at centralising all of its operations back to its head office in Sydney. And at the time, I was part of a 100-strong architectural team in-house in Brisbane. And they offered some of us national positions in Sydney. And my husband and I looked at moving, but instead we decided that I'd start up a business with 5 of my colleagues at Mirvac, and we started our own practice called DC8 Studio. So that was in 2009, and I just had my second bub and started this business and I had that for 5 years. I was co-owner for 5 years. We had a studio in Sydney and in Brisbane, had a team of about 20. Most of them were ex-Mirvac as well. So it was like being part of a family and people that I'd worked with for a very long time. And we grew really quickly, did really well. We were BRW Fast Starters. We were state finalists in the Telstra Business Awards. But I got to this sort of 5-year period and realised that it wasn't really where I wanted my life to go and the kind of work I wanted to be doing and how I wanted to be working. And in mid-2014, I left that business and my husband and I moved to the Byron hinterland and I started Undercover Architect. And I've been doing that for the last 2 and almost a half years.
Excellent. Well, 20 years in architecture, you must have started very early.
I went straight from school. So decided when I was 16 I wanted to be an architect. So yeah, it was a very clear path for me. So yeah, straight from school, did my degree and went straight into work. So, and I worked whilst I was at university. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, look, we'll sort of dig in because, you've got, I suppose, 2 journeys in that, one from leaving a large corporate, but also another one where you left a really successful medium-sized business. So we'll go into that in a moment, but just tell the BLG listeners something about you outside of work that, your family and friends might know, but us as listeners wouldn't.
Yeah, so I think for us the most significant thing that we've done is make our move to the Byron hinterland. So we now live on almost 80 acres. I've never had a farming background, neither has my husband, but we got married in Bangalore almost 11 years ago, and for probably the last 9 years before moving, we really sort of fell in love with this idea of moving to the Byron hinterland. And we renovated houses in Brisbane over a period of 12 years. So renovated 3 homes, had a baby each time, we lived in these houses. It was all a bit full on. And after the last renovation and a series of other events in terms of that we can dive into more, going to Uganda with the Hunger Project, I really realised that we needed to kind of just harness this dream and make it happen. And so we have this beautiful property. My husband he's an ex-physio, but he's now breeding miniature Galloway cows. He's just added some Berkshire pigs to the mix as well. And he's on this big journey of learning about how to be an animal breeder and breed heritage breeds. And we have 3 young kids who are almost 10, almost 8 and 6. And they go to a little local school that has just under 50 kids in it. And we just have this beautiful lifestyle where some weeks I may not even leave the property, which for me, having grown up in Sydney and always being in the thick of things, is a big change for us, but I absolutely love it and love being able to work from home and create a business that helps so many people from where I live. So
brilliant. And what are some of those changes? So if you look back at your childhood versus your children, what are some of the opportunities they get now that you may not have?
I think, I think I was really fortunate. I grew up in Sydney and we could still play on the streets. We could go and disappear in the afternoon and, our neighbour had an incredibly loud whistle and used to call us home when mum wanted us. And, it was a really idyllic childhood. And I think some of that, unfortunately, has been lost in suburban parts of Australia. I think our move to Brisbane certainly helped us capture a bit more of it for our kids. But here, my kids come home from school and disappear outside, and just to have this amount of space and greenness around them and a very small community. It's a very diverse community, so they're exposed to lots of different ideas and values and a lot of contrast, which is great. And yeah, I think for us, it's just been beautiful to kind of get connected back to this type of environment and to slow down our lifestyle, just to simplify it. We really just wanted to live a really flexible, family-centred lifestyle, and I feel like that we're able to do that here much better than if we were living in an urban location. So,
yeah, no, that sounds wonderful. I must admit, coming from a farming background myself, and I was just up at my parents who moved off the property but still in the country. And, it's great. I was taking my children through driving a car and, it's amazing. Things that we take for granted. You're living on 80 acres. There's plenty of room not to run into things.
There is, most definitely. And I think one of the biggest benefits is that nobody can hear me getting cross at the kids. So,
well, I'm sure that doesn't happen often, but when it does, yes, that's great. And look, I know in Mirvac you did some brilliant work, as you said. What were you sort of struggling with when you decided to leave? Was there anything holding you back from leaving the safety of a successful company like Mirvac?
Oh, look, Mirvac, when I was there, it was actually an amazing place to work. A lot of my architectural colleagues thought I'd crossed to the dark side by going to work for a developer. But I just got to see so much of my work built I think I was there for 7.5 years, and I got to see hundreds of my, designs built. And as an architect, that was just an extraordinary opportunity, and a fantastic team. As they dealt with the GFC and they looked at restructuring, though, the culture started to radically change. And I just, in terms of moving to Sydney and trying to do a role there, I just didn't believe that we'd get the same level of, I don't know, just fun and engagement and enjoyment from the role as I'd got in Brisbane and working with the team that I had. So I think, the biggest challenge was that it was a big machine to, move. So decisions, of course, were a little bit slower, but I loved the way that Mirvac had been built on this premise of serving its customer and always ensuring that the homeowner had a really great home to live in. And so every decision was driven by that. So, and I just got to learn so much because every department was always involved in every design decision, which was frustrating day to day. Mm-hmm. But looking back now, it taught me a lot about the buildability of things, the serviceability of things, the longevity of things, as much as how well they're designed, and how all of those things work together to make a home great to live in.
Great. And what were some of your biggest fears moving from Mirvac into, I know you were with Mirvac colleagues, into your own practice?
I think it's that you have this kind of, I think, false belief that you've got job security inside a large corporate, which I think when we saw how they responded to the GFC really blew my world apart a bit. To go from a company that had 100 architectural staff, they went down to 4 architectural staff in the Brisbane office in the space of about 14 months. So that, to see that happen after 30 years of building this business, that Bob Hamilton had, and it, changed hands and sort of took different direction, you just realise that there is actually no security in being employed versus being in your own business. So I think that certainly did help allay some of those fears. For me, I had, I think going into business with 5 other business partners, my main fears were around, given that I had 2 small children, I had 2 kids under 2, how would I be able to contribute as an equal partner? Would I be able to have a contributing role that really made a difference to the business, or was I going to be in some way, shape or form just carried along, and we had all been part of the senior management team. One of my business partners was actually my previous boss at Mirvac. So, we wanted to make sure that we were all on a level playing field and building a great business together. But I think that there was an inherent fear of the dynamics of our hierarchy and our previous, roles inside Mirvac and how that would work long term in our business. So,
and what help did you receive to move through some of those fears?
Well, I think we were really good at just working together and transitioning quite slowly from one to the other, and being quite open with each other. I know that when I went from DC8 Studio to Undercover Architect, I won a scholarship that gave me a year of business coaching. And I think that was pivotal in helping me manage the transition from a larger business into my own business as me a lot more seamlessly, because I had somebody sort of helping me navigate questions I'd not really come across. As an architect, you're trained as an architect, not as a business owner. So there was certainly things that business coaching really helped me with in that process, and also the accountability of setting goals and having somebody to report to, and those types of things helped as well. So, yep.
Yeah, look, I think that accountability is really important. And so leaving to set up your own, what was sort of your key thought process around that at the time?
So in 2013, I was involved in a leadership and immersion program that the Business Chicks run with the Hunger Project. So the Hunger Project's a not-for-profit that operates in third world countries around the world. It believes that the key to ending hunger and poverty actually lies with those who are most impacted by it. So it educates and empowers the hungry and the poor, basically, to end their own hunger and poverty. And Business Chicks, it's one of Australia's largest female business networking groups and membership bodies, and I think has over 40,000 members in Australia, and Emma's recently opened it up in the States as well. So I signed up for this leadership and immersion program, which involves committing to fundraising $10,000 and then travelling overseas to one of the Hunger Project's centres, which for me was going to be Uganda. And I think in that process, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about what was really important to me, what my core values were. They sort of got tested in ways that I hadn't anticipated. And I, along the process, got to meet some amazing people and inside networks that I'd not really accessed before. I think in the architectural industry and the development industry, and this may occur in most industries, you can be a bit insular and only move in circles sort of that are typical of your industry, whereas through this leadership and immersion program, I was starting to be in business networking groups with people from other industries and just getting my world cracked open a bit. So I started to realise that I'd never really dreamed of owning a big architectural practice. I loved the people I worked with. I really loved the team that we had, and I loved my business partners, and loved going I loved building this thing with them, but it wasn't really my dream, my personal dream. And I could see that it wasn't really going to help me live a family-centred life, because I could see myself just continuing to work more and more hours as my kids got a little bit older. I'd had a third bub by then. So so I went to Uganda in November of 2013, and I came home, and a week later told my business partners I was leaving, and we had no sort of legal means in place for me to voluntarily exit the business. So over the course of the next 6 months, we sort of did that transition gently and put all of that in place. And in the end of financial year 2014, I finished up at DC8 Studio. A week later, we moved to the Byron hinterland, and I started up Undercover Architect sort of all at the same time. So
you definitely didn't do things in halves.
No, it was like literally like a light bulb just went on. It had been burning slowly through the course of that 2013 year. But I came home from Uganda, and it was like my world had been turned upside down, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I just couldn't. And it was a very uncomfortable and hard process to work through, and some pretty confronting and uncomfortable stuff. But honestly, it was too loud to be ignored. And so whilst it was a very difficult sort of, I think, 7 months by the time I left DC8, it was just all very necessary and important in terms of us actually living a life in alignment with our core values and how we wanted our future to be.
Yeah, and look, often people on guests on this podcast and listeners go through this transition, and well done for taking the brave steps that you have. Just how did it come about with your partner, with your husband? Obviously, you've gone through the transformation. You saw the light. You've explained that really well. But how did you get on the same page? Take us through that.
Yeah, look, as I said earlier, we'd been renovating houses in Brisbane for 12 years. So we'd sort of always had this plan to renovate these houses and get to a financial point, build up this financial nest egg by doing these renovations ourselves, where we could actually move to the property that we wanted to own. And that was always sort of somewhere in the hinterland. And I think the last house that we did, it took 3.5 years. We turned a house that was 100 square metres into over 400 square metres. We lived in it for most of the time. We had 3 small children. I started DC8 Studio at the same time we were doing this, and then also signed up to this trip. And we literally were drowning, and we'd just bitten off way more than we could chew, and we're just trying to chew through it really fast, but both getting very stressed about it all. And I think it was the middle of 2013, it actually started to occur to me that I could leave DC8 Studio. It had never really even occurred to me prior to that. And it was quite a rude shock like, you can actually walk away from this business, Amelia, and
Yes.
and then I went on a conference with the Women in Focus team at the Commonwealth Bank, and they were amazing, and got to meet some incredible people there, and came home from that, and I said to my husband, look, I know I need to leave DC8 Studio. I'm not sure when or what for, but it's there. And he, I think, was struggling with the fact that we were just cramming so much into our lives. He's always been a person who likes to be in the moment, have time and space to do things now. And I'm always looking ahead and trying to work out where we're going and what we're doing and what are we putting in place now to make that happen. And so we've always sort of had a bit of friction around that state between us. And he was just at his wit's end with how much I was obviously trying to cram into our lives. And so when I came home from Uganda and said, no, I've got to go, he was like, well, just think about, I was the main breadwinner. And we'd, by that stage, had this house on the market. And so he was very much of, do we stay in Brisbane? Do we buy a cheap house, do another reno, get ourselves more financially set up whilst you set up the business, not have the pressure of you needing to earn money, plus build a business, plus keep a roof over our head, plus pay a mortgage, all of these types of things. And I was like, nah, we don't do it now, we won't ever do it. And I had this urgency to get it done. And we had a lot of difficult times in our marriage during that period where we were disagreeing about a lot of stuff. But my husband is amazing, and he's always been my biggest cheerleader, and always been, even when it's obviously difficult. It's going to sound really strange, but my attitude's always been, I can get us there. Look, I'll just show you the way. Yes. But yeah, I'm very fortunate to have him in my life, because he keeps me very grounded, and certainly gives me a good kick up the butt when I'm getting too locked into Amelia world, as he calls it. But he's always been the person that said, look, if this is what you really want to do, let's do it. And I knew ultimately he wanted to be where we are now, and he wanted this lifestyle. And it was just, he's a bit more cautious than I am. So yeah, it was, for us, it's still not, we're still building this business, still making this all work, still financially making this all work, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel now. And for us, it's the realization of a very long held dream. So
brilliant. And look, and thanks for being so open and sharing that. And I know for many people, including myself, that leave and go through a journey like this, it is a family journey. It's very much around having that conversation. And my wife seems very similar to your husband. I'm the ideas person. I'm always the dreamer, always the one pushing the boundaries. And she's the rock. She's the one supporting. So it sounds like you've got that. And often, they talk about opposites attract in a relationship that makes it stronger. And it looks like you and your husband have got that great necessary tension, but, working it through. So that's fantastic. So if you fast forward to today, you walk into an event, a networking event, and someone says, so Amelia, what do you do? How do you answer that?
I say I own a business called Undercover Architect, which operates mainly online to help homeowners get it right when they're designing, building and renovating their homes. So I work one-to-one with people using technology, working over Skype to help them get it right with their design. And then I also have an online program that helps them get ready for their renovation. And there's a few new home builders in there as well. And I blog weekly, and I have a podcast as well. And I have a massive commitment to providing people with help, whatever budget level they're at, so that they can always access information for free to really improve their journey and the outcome of their building or renovation project.
Well done. And, as you know, because you've given me some great advice, we're going to build at the moment. And I'm amazed that I can buy an online course from overseas for $500, and I'll get so much more support and guidance than if I'm dropping $1 million into a knockover and rebuild. So I definitely see a need for what you're doing, and if anyone's thinking of going through the journey, I met you a little too late. We were okay, but I'm sure that we would have been much better if we had spoken to you a lot earlier. So, I think what you've built on and what you are building is fantastic. So well done on that. And how's that sort of different to if you're at DC8 or at Mirvac? When you help people today, how's that different to the two businesses you've had previously?
So my focus now is all on single residential homes, working with families who are, doing their forever homes or their sort of, longer term houses. So I don't do any work for developers anymore. I've got a few residual sort of things from the beginning of the business. Obviously, as I transitioned into this, I took on a couple of clients that were more in keeping with what I'd always done. So I've still got sort of a couple of them on the books. But yeah, for me, it's really about helping change the way that we create houses, literally one family at a time, one house at a time. So, and the fact that I very rarely meet my clients in person too is very different. And I also don't offer the full architectural package. I really just work with you in a design process up front, and then I don't enforce copyright. So you can take my designs that we've worked on together to a local draftsperson or building designer or builder or another designer to then continue through getting your approval documentation done and your building documentation done. So for me, I had to let go of a lot of stuff that I'd been attached to in previous parts of my career, attached to how my designs turned out on site, attached to controlling and helping that process at a detail level. For me, this was really about seeing that all of the way that we design houses can really leave behind how does the client and the homeowner feel in that process. Do they feel confident and supported and empowered? And oftentimes they don't. And it's oftentimes that they won't work with a designer because that they feel that they lose some level of control over their project. And what I wanted to do was make sure that at every step of the way, the homeowner felt like they were in control and much more confident and empowered in their project. And so I've set up a business that enables me to focus on that. And that means doing a few things differently to how my architectural colleagues do it and how I've done it previously.
Brilliant. Great. Like I said, it's a fantastic service. And it's, from an online design, blog, podcast, etc., there's lots of BLG listeners that are going through a similar transition. They're thought leaders and they're looking at ways of monetizing that. How do you go about monetizing your brilliant IP?
So I have the one-to-one services. So I've got 3 different packages that I work with people either to design their new home or their renovation or to fix a design that they've had done by somebody else. And so they're very tight packages that get delivered in a certain way. And then I've got the online program and I've got more digital products coming out this year that are content-based digital products to help at that one-to-many level. And I've also started running workshops last year to help people get ready for their renovation. So for me, it's really transitioning into that one-to-many level just to help the goal's always been to help as many homeowners as I possibly can. I think that for me was the biggest lesson from leaving Mirvac and coming into this business was I loved working at that really large scale and really impacting at a large scale how so many people got to live. And when you're a solo architect kind of doing one house at a time, you can't really do that. It's, you can only take on a couple of projects per year, whereas Undercover Architect lets me help lots and lots of homeowners through working at that one-to-many level. So
great. And how do you go about finding your ideal clients?
Interestingly enough, and if you told me that this was possible, I would have told you that you were crazy. But I started blogging, and that has been, I've never done active marketing beyond Facebook ads of a free opt-in. So I've literally just blogged weekly, made a commitment to, I think in the August or September, I started this business in July of 2014, started blogging in, I think, August or September, and just made a commitment to blog weekly. And some weeks it was horrible and hard. But yeah, it meant that I have built up this huge volume of content on the site. And it was just really doing it with that mindset of wanting to help and educate and serve people and not getting attached to whether or not it was ever going to make any money. What it does, though, is that I also at the same time worked out who my ideal client was, and I spoke to just them. And so that blog obviously then helps people self-select who wants to work with me, who and they build up trust before they even approach me. And then that completely changes the way that we work together. It's just the clients I work with now are the best clients I've worked with in my entire career. So yeah, it's just been amazing.
Yeah, look, I completely agree. I think 2 great piece of advice. One is the consistency. And like you said, it's a journey. It's not something that's going to turn around in a short period of time. So I think that's one great bit of advice. And the other is that ideal client, that the better you can niche down. And I know for a lot of people, rejection's really hard, especially if you come from a big corporate background and all of a sudden it's your own business and you can't help. It's like your baby. You can't help but take it personally. And it shouldn't be that way. You should be comfortable that 80% of people actually say no, because you really want to work with that 20% that you can make a significant difference. So well done. I think they're two lessons and tips that you've given, which you've, learnt the hard way, but I think they're ones that I fully endorse. So well done. Obviously, there's other challenges in growing a business and, running a farm and 3 active children. What are some of those challenges that you face today?
I wish that my days were 48 hours long. So time, it's always time. I was very deliberate about Undercover Architect not being a big practice. At the moment, I don't have any permanent staff. I'm about to take on a VA. But up to this point, I've just used sort of the odd contractor here and there. Oh, excuse me. So I've built this business myself, literally sort of wearing every hat possible. And it's time. I've just got such big dreams for this business and things that I want to do, but I've also got 3 beautiful growing children and a husband that I love. So it's, and responsibilities around, and I'm very fortunate that my husband is at home and does a lot of, the lion's share of all of those things. So, but yeah, it's time. It's just totally time. And, for me, the key has always been, how do I scale this business without scaling a big team that I then, need to manage, because ultimately I want flexibility as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, look, I think it's great. I've said on other episodes that there's the essential of getting, a computer and mobile phone these days to run a business, because you can run it from anywhere. But I think the other is a VA. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I'm expecting that to be life-changing, Paul. So.
Look, it will. And I've got a podcast that I think I've sent you. If not, I'll put it in the show notes on how you can use a VA. But I know for me and for a lot of the BLG listeners, it really makes a massive difference. And you can build that virtual team up to support you. And the other thing is, roughly you've got 5 to 7 roles at any point in your life.
Yes.
And it's really about deciding what the key goals are. And actually, there's some roles that you'll have to do less of whilst you do and focus on others. So there's never such a thing as balance, but just getting that right and having that virtual team will certainly help.
Yeah.
So I look forward to tracking your progress in the community on that. And, I'm sure you've got some great advice so far. And as you said, you spent 12 months getting coached, which is wonderful. What's a key learning you've taken out of that program?
I think that for me, one of the biggest sort of mantras I have is progress, not perfection. So I am a massive control freak. I think that's been my resistance to getting a VA on board is I feel that, Undercover Architect is another baby of mine, and much more so than anything I've ever done before. I love the fact that I can make really nimble, quick decisions with it. I don't have to move 5 business partners or a big corporation. But at the same time, it means that I can also be my own worst enemy, because the ability to actually put anything out there before it's absolutely perfect and controlled to within an nth of its life is always challenging. So progress, not perfection, is and just expecting that things are, you're going to need to test them. I think it was Jack Delosa said, if you're not embarrassed by the first product that you put out, in future years to come, then you waited too long. So I think that for me is a great lesson. And I've just learned so much more about the people that I work with in the last 2.5 years, more so than any other part of my career. So by just doing that thing of putting it out, asking the questions, testing and seeing what lands, what works, what people respond to, and then honing along the way. So
yeah, I think that's great advice. And I often say to people, it's you're an overnight it takes 10 years to be an overnight success, as you know. And it's often we compare people when they're at their best. and the end product and think, well, why isn't my product like that? But you don't go back the fact that they've spent the last 10 years doing it. So your advice is spot on. It's just iterations. All you've got to be is better than what you were the day prior.
Yes, most
that's
definitely.
What you should compare yourself, not to the best in the industry, and just constantly improve, which sounds like you're going through that journey. And to be honest, probably most of the listeners out there really battle with that perfection over progress. So well done for talking about it, and also great tips on it. So you've talked about your farm, your business, your kids, etc. So you've got a lot going on, but just take me through what a typical day looks like for you.
So mornings, of course, are getting all the kids off to school, hopefully to the bus if we can make it. Otherwise dropping them at school. And then I'm generally working from home. So I'm here and I'm, one step up from pajamas, and I'm working on either content creation or on client work or Skyping with clients or those types of things. So I have where we live, we've got a garage as a slightly separate building, and it's got a loft space over the top of it, and that's my office. So I often I will work up there, or I'll bring my computer, my laptop into the house if I need to be around the house for some reason. So, and then it's really just a case of doing as much work as I can during a school day, and then oftentimes hubby he'll be looking after the kids in the afternoon, or they'll come and hang out in the office with me, and I'll keep working through till dinner time. And it's all very easy. And as I said earlier, there's some weeks where the furthest I go is to drop the kids at the bus stop. So it's weird for me to think that when in Brisbane and in Sydney, I was always the person out on the street and getting, out to things. And I've become such a homebody since we've lived here that, there'll be a couple of days where I go, hang on, when was the last time I left the house? So but I have lots of online connections and friendships with people that live in lots of different locations that I make sure I stay in touch with so that I don't become a total recluse.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's lots of people who, if they were in your environment, would not want to leave home as well.
It's pretty stunning. Yeah, it's pretty stunning. I think for me, the biggest thing I think when you work on your own, there's always that fear of, should I just go and get a job? Surely this is too hard. And all I have to do is walk outside and say, I know I would rather work 80 hours in my own business building this than work 40 hours in somebody else's business building that. So I'm really fortunate that I live in a place where I just am in constant contact with my why. And it just, it's for me, it's just a fantastic reminder of the reason that we did all of this.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think, you mentioned about getting the VA and, the right amount of support can start to then chip away at that 80. I know it's lots of hours in the first instance to get set up, but as you start to get to a particular point and you start to get success, you can start to back those off and enjoy that environment even more.
Most definitely.
Which is great. As far as you mentioned the Hunger Project before,
yes,
which is great. Is there anything else that you want to talk to listeners about from the Hunger Project perspective? Yeah,
so the Hunger Project, I think for me, the thing that really attracted me to it was that it's such a sustainable model. So, so much of the help that we give in third world countries is about handouts and benefit and aid, whereas this is focused on education and changing mindsets. So when I went to Uganda and met people working with the Hunger Project, it works on a volunteer basis. I think there's 350 staff employed by the Hunger Project worldwide, and they're impacting something like 19 million people around the world. So it's a very low cost model that works on unlocking the potential inside people. And I think, and to have seen that firsthand for myself in Uganda was just eye-opening, and to see the difference that it made to people in the way that they carried themselves and their confidence. You would see, when your only reference point is generations of hunger and all you can see in front of you is generations of hunger and poverty, you can imagine what it takes to flip your mindset and realise that you can actually choose a different life, and then to have somebody help you with the tools to do that. And so I think, what for me was really amazing was I went there and you would say to people, so how did you start working with the Hunger Project? And they'd say, well, I changed my mindset and then I did this and then I did this. And the first, and it's part of the Hunger Project's 5-step model is that the first step is they have to change their mindset. And to hear it part of their language, I was in a business with 5 business partners. We'd come from a corporate background with KPIs and all sorts of, performance measurements and that type of thing. So when we started our business, we were so anti all of that. But what happened was sort of this absence of accountability inside that kind of reaction against not wanting that corporate model. And then when I saw just how leadership was defined in these communities in Uganda, where leadership was about actually being accountable and about calling those that you lead to account and about understanding that you actually have to change internally in order to be able to step up. That for me was just, you can see how it works and that it has longevity and a sustainability in terms of really changing the way that people get to live. And they've just had such significant impact and traction in these countries that they work in. They particularly focus on working with women because they know that creates generational change. Women will educate their children, they'll spend money there. And they work providing microfinance and, they build communities inside these areas that they then all rely on each other to get strength and resilience in sort of tackling these challenges that they face every day. So yeah, for me, it's an extraordinary model in just totally changing the way that people can live in these locations.
No, it sounds amazing and well done for, going to that degree, actually going over there. I hear a lot of people that, do it from the comfort of their lounge room, so to speak, but to actually go over and experience it firsthand, I can hear that passion come out, and the listeners will hear that passion, and we'll have links so that people, if they want to follow a similar journey for you, can find more about the Hunger Project.
Yeah.
So sorry, you were going to...
I was going to say they now run, so previously they just did these trips with business chicks, that they now run them for both men and women. They've got a leadership program that you can sign up to and commit to fundraising $10,000. I encourage anybody to commit to fundraising $10,000. You learn so much about yourself and the people that you've surrounded yourself with. The fundraising actually was probably harder than the trip itself. And so you can sign up for these trips. They operate in Bangladesh, a fair few centres around Africa, in India, and they tailor their programs based on the needs of the country and the location. And the strategy is always that they don't overlap with what the government's already doing, and they demonstrate that models work, so then the government takes them on. So it's all built around longevity and sustainability. So yeah, please check it out and get behind it. It's just an amazing model, and I think it really helps us. We have an enormous sense of privilege in how we get to live in particularly in Australia. And for me, I realise that privilege also comes with a huge responsibility to do something with it, and whether that's in your own community or it is going and doing something globally. I think I have received so much more than I've given to the Hunger Project on my journey with them, and it's been amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, no, well said. Brilliantly said. So now what we'll do is just move to the last section, which is the take action round. And It's just a quick series of questions I'm going to ask you so you can give some actionable advice to the BLG community. So the first question is, what is your number one personal productivity tip?
This one is such a tricky one. I moved, it's going to sound strange, but I moved my Facebook app off my home screen on Facebook on my mobile phone. So I know you can turn off the notifications, but I don't like doing that. So I just moved the app symbol off my home screen so I can't see the notifications. So I actually now it's amazing how much more productive that has made me. It's crazy.
True. It's probably the greatest addiction known to the world, Facebook. So
I actually I heard Simon Sinek when he was here in Australia recently being interviewed by Charlie Pickering, and Charlie Pickering said to him, is there anything that you're not good at? And he said he actually, when he has to write a book, he hires a babysitter who comes over and basically makes sure that he's working, because he said, I'd surf the internet all day long. And I'm like, well, if somebody like Simon Sinek needs a babysitter, then I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah, look, it's that double-edged sword. It's, technology has helped us meet, and you share your great story and journey today.
Yeah.
But the flip side is, yes, it can get out of control. So that's great advice. On that home screen, though, I'm sure there's other apps that help you. What are the apps that do live on your home screen? Home screen you can live without limitations.
So I installed an app called Forest a couple of months ago to help with productivity. So it basically grows trees. So you turn it on, you choose a time frame, and you grow a tree, and you can't touch your phone during that time. Otherwise, you kill the tree. So,
Right.
and it's a great app because it makes me put my phone down and not pick it up, basically. And my kids love it. They sort of come home and say, "How many trees did you grow today, Mum?" I've got my podcasting app on the home screen as well. I find podcasts are just the most extraordinary free resource of education and entertainment and enrichment that we just are so fortunate to have access to. And my favourite one is probably 99% Invisible. And it's not a business one. It just basically explores all sorts of things that you might be curious about and tells you all the history behind them. So it's for me, they're sort of 17 to 20 minutes long. So when I want to work but switch off from learning more, but just be really engaged and interested, that's what I'll listen to. So, and I think that's the rest are, there's banking apps and things like that, which I am always very conscious of staying across my cash flow and understanding where I'm at financially in my business. So they're really important for me to have easy access to. So Xero and my banking app are on my home screen as well.
Okay, excellent, great. And what's one piece of advice you wish you had have received when you first left Mirvac that you'd love to give to the listeners now?
Oh, wow. If you can operate your business from a place of service, not from how you're going to earn money, the money will come. I never would have believed it if somebody had said it to me. I commit probably a day and a half a week to creating free content, but it's the mindset that I've had inside Undercover Architect. It's always been about serving and helping and educating. So it literally dropped any kind of need to monetize it, I suppose, and attach it to a monetization kind of strategy. But the flip side has been that it's been one of the most key monetization components of my business. So I think that it can really feel weird when you go from a corporate environment to your own business to think about giving all of your knowledge away. At the end of the day, nobody can actually replicate you. Nobody can replace you. And you just have to trust that you sharing your knowledge is only going to serve the people that you need to find and help as much as it will serve your business. So
brilliant. So great advice. And what I love about that advice is, you've demonstrated in this episode that you do it. So I think it's great advice, but there's no better way of actually teaching someone else than to do it yourself. So well done. And I'm sure your kids, will see that, and they mightn't say it to you a lot, but very proud of who you are. And just well done. You're
thanks, Paul.
Inspiration. So how do people find out more about you, Amelia?
So head to undercoverarchitect.com. There is loads of free info there. There's some free downloads and all sorts of other information about how you can work with me. But at the very least, if all you do is read all of my free information, you'll be streets ahead in creating a better outcome when you're building or renovating your home.
Excellent. Great. So thanks for sharing your brilliant journey today. We wish you all the best in the forthcoming years, and we love to continue to have you in the Build, Live, Give community and help you as much as we can as well. So thanks for your sharing your journey today.
Thanks very much, Paul, for having me. And I really encourage people to join the Build, Live, Give community and Facebook group, because it's always key to find like-minded people to share your journey, particularly when you're working from home on your own. And I think it's a great group of people in there, all sort of working towards the similar goals.
Brilliant. Great. Thanks, Amelia.
That's
Have a great day.
You too. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give show. If you found this show helpful, please share it with others so we can build businesses, live great lives, and give back to the community. If you would like to join the BLG community, go to our website, www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.